Thank you for listening to Men Talk Ubuntu podcast and being a valued member of our community. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube, Instagram, and other social media now for access to our latest updates. DM us and let us know what your mental health is on a scale of 1 to 5. Thank you.
But it's good. It's good to hear though, because that also, it shows a side that isn't always represented, which is how well siblings get along, especially from our communities, and support each other and learn from each other as well, which is something that's increasingly important, just like we're learning from each other now. And thanks for mentioning Benjamin Franklin, Ray. The quote that I'd forgotten came back, and I think it is a Benjamin Franklin one, which is, when you're done learning, you're done. Yeah. So that touches on what you were saying about, pretty much if you finish learning, that's the end, right? May as well start digging. Now we're speaking about being third generation culture kids, which is just about, people being raised in cultures that are different to their parents. Like all of us, it seems, moved here when we were relatively young. I was probably the latest person to move to the UK because I moved here when I was 18. And what I want to ask about this to begin with initially was going to be about how your siblings might perceive culture differently to you and perhaps your parents, but we've already touched on that, which is great, and we'll dig further into it. For you yourselves, do you feel sort of rooted in your culture, or in your parents' culture, if you will, or do you feel like a loose leaf, to stretch the analogy? So you quite embedded into it, or is it sort of shifted off and you've embraced all these other elements from the UK or other cultures?
Oh, once again, very, very interesting, because for me, if I'm honest, I sort of rejected my parents' culture until I was about 19, in the sense that obviously I'd moved out at 17 and I was kind of free to do whatever I wanted, and even when I was still living at my mum's, it was a case where I'd be more interested in the British culture just naturally because I wanted to fit in, and that's what I resonated with the most. Now, it wasn't until, once again, that journey of self-discovery and, I dove a little bit deeper into African history and that sort of thing as well, and an Angolan history. And once again, that was for me that was liberating in a way, because I found myself celebrating our heroes. There's Queen Nzinga, she's called, from Angola, for example, one of the great heroes from Angola. So learning about her history and what she did during the colonial times and that sort of thing was really inspiring. And for me, go on, sorry.
Sorry, was she the warrior queen or emperor? Okay, cool. Sorry, carry on.
Fought off the Portuguese for 30 odd years. That's the one. And, knowing things like that can be so liberating, because, of course, growing up in the UK, Black history basically starts from slavery if you're in school. And once again, I touched on the subject of external factors that can influence your mental state and who you are as a person if you identify with them. If you're just taught that your history started from slavery, so a lot of the times you can feel depleted and you can feel as though you don't really have a history without the outsiders or without those external forces, when in reality there's a rich array of African history that you can learn from, and not in an Afrocentric way, because you can learn the history from a place of, I want to know about me. Because since we're on the topic of quotes, one of the great quotes as well, if you don't know where you've been, then a lot of the times you're not going to know where you're going.
Great. Right, so is this the point where I add my bit?
Of course.
Right, so with myself, it's an interesting journey. So similar to Reuben as well, I tried to reject what we were taught because of growing up in a different environment. But yeah, the older I grew, the more I kind of realized why those values are kind of important. And when I got with my wife as well, it was also a bit of a shock, because she's British and brought up British. So her culture was totally different to where mine is. So it was quite interesting in the sense of like when you're exchanging different things of how you do things and trying to figure out who's ultimately right and this kind of stuff. So in a way, I've had to kind of have an hybrid approach, because I realize what works for me in that culture and what works for me in my culture, but and also appreciation of both and realizing why certain things were done in that sort of certain way. So we both kind of embrace both cultures and yeah, pretty much take a hybrid approach.
Excellent. We've transitioned from boys to men now. You brought us up to speed. We're onto the current. At that point, then, I'd like to ask how you both perhaps feel or think your parents adjusted to the different culture. I know we focused on you and your siblings so far, but how about these giants whose shoulders we stand upon? How do you feel they've adjusted to the different culture, or what have you witnessed?
So for myself, it's quite interesting because, of course, with Angolans, we're sort of, a lot of us have Portuguese blood directly. So in this case, in my family, this is the case. So there is always sort of been that hybridness in terms of how we do things. So a lot of the things were a mixture of Portuguese and Angolan side and an Angolan side to things. So I'd say my parents have always sort of, because of the Portuguese side, it wasn't really an adjustment period. It was just my parents sort of being proud Africans. So they've never kind of stepped away from that at all. And, so my mum always used to say, you might be in England when you're out there, when you're in the house, you're in Angola. So I knew what that meant. I knew, if she heard anything from the outside, it was over for me inside. So, so I'd say for my parents, they've had a good knowledge of the culture, but have always made sure that they've stayed true to who they are.
Yeah, myself as well. I feel like it was a journey for them, as it is for quite a lot of parents. I mean, I feel like it was initial shock because when the first, like for example, for my dad, the job that he used to do back home was a farm manager, so he was really in a high position and stuff. So when he came over here, because of how things work, unfortunately, he wasn't able to get a job within that sort of profession. So I think for him, it was a major shock initially. But I feel like as years have gone on, he's kind of embraced some of the British culture, but as well as still stayed true to the Zambian culture and the way of how Zambians are kind of used to doing things.
Thank you. Because I think I was really interested in these elements because there's the mention of seeing poverty, like when we are back home, if you will,
Yeah.
because poverty there is very different to poverty here. And
Of
it
course.
gives you, I think, this visceral fear of
Yeah.
ending up in that. Not what you see on TV with the flies and all, it's not everywhere, all right? it's not everywhere. And that is not a true and accurate representation of what it is actually like on the ground.
Mm.
That said, when you can see that, and when the, shall we say, governmental support system is not the same as what we have here,
Yeah.
that element of, poverty is only a few steps away, it changes your mindset. And I think that acknowledgement of our parents and how much they've done to get us into a better situation and position was very important. So I'm very glad we covered that as well. And now I wanted to just, before we move on perhaps to a bit more on finance, because you're both really, like we say, financial education enthusiasts, I'd like to just touch on what you think being a third culture generation kid has given you as an advantage, and what's perhaps the continuing advantage and challenge. I don't want to say greatest because that's too dramatic, but just in general, just what are some of the challenges? Just one challenge and one advantage that being a third culture generation kid has given you.
So I'd say the advantage would be in the way in which you see things. So you can sometimes see opportunities where others don't. So that is what I'd say the advantage is. For example, Lugano and I have a friend who is Pakistani, but he was born in China, and right now he owns three businesses. We actually interviewed it on the podcast, Shaf. She owns 3 restaurants, and he actually mentioned it himself. He was like, the kids here, they just don't see the opportunity that this country provides for them. And he could confidently say that just because of the experiences that he had in China and his knowledge of back home, back in Pakistan as well. So I'd say that's the main advantage, just the way in which you see things. And I'd say a disadvantage initially at the start could be once again, your mentality going into things, because whereas a kid that is born here can confidently go into any situation and be like, yeah, these are my people. And sometimes if you're not from a certain country, sometimes you can be a little bit more reserved, and that sometimes can stop you from going for certain opportunities or developing certain relationships. So mentality in both ways, negative and positive.
Brilliant. Thank you. We'll transition to you, Lugano.
Yeah, so I think similar to Reuben, I think just the appreciation of the different environments, because we've been able to exist in both, we know the good and bad of both. Therefore, it helps us to navigate this environment a bit better, because what, for example, like you talked about the hunger of a child back there, where you're literally seeing street kids where the state can't help, whereas here poverty doesn't get as bad as that. There's always a state that can kind of help and that kind of stuff. So knowing that you're in that fortunate situation, it helps you sort of navigate things better. So I think that's the advantage. The disadvantage, I mean, I'm struggling to see one. Perhaps maybe maybe when you're young, I think the disadvantage could be you could easily be strayed if you're not true to yourself, because we constantly be put in a way of constantly wanting to fit in, and you can end up losing yourself. And unfortunately, I've seen some certain cases of that. Whereas similar to back to the quote that Reuben said, if you don't know where you're from, you don't know where you're going. So sometimes you can just kind of get lost within that matrix, going on the point that Reuben mentioned, and you just end up totally losing yourself, and you just don't know who you are, why you are, who you are. And yeah.
Excellent. I see who I'm going to have to go and watch Matrix 4 with. Is it 4 or 5? I don't know. I think it's 5. Excellent. Thank you. I think that quote now even lends more weight to itself with when we think about, let's say we had Black History Month in October in the UK. And like you said, if Black history for most people starts with slavery, and that's what you associate as where you've been, and you think that's roughly, say, where you're going, rather than it starting with the point that you made, Reuben, like if you really deep the ancestry and just the sheer amount of achievement our cultures achieved, and you look at what for some of us, our tribes achieved, it should fill you with an immense sense of pride and a regal feeling, if you will, like I'm going to do great things. And that's, I think, some of the advantage that some people who are, say, born here, because the history that they learn about themselves is very different. So why wouldn't you go into a room and feel that you're going to dominate and take over? And you also mentioned earlier that there is still an attainment gap with people from our communities. And that's absolutely true. Just like the teacher shared certain facts with you when you were in the drama class. I think often what is missed in that explanation is why. Like, we know knowledge or information is fairly useless. Like, you need to interpret it, you need to give your rationale, but until one of the gifts university gives you, I suppose, is that ability to think critically. And I wish more teachers would think about some of the things and the impact that they have on people. So that's one thing I do. With that said, I want to ask you both what your why is. Like, why do you do what you do? Why have you gone so far and tried to push yourself so high? Like, what are you doing this for? What's your why?
My why would be, as I said, my philosophy on life is that you should always continue growing. So my why is to
Oh,
It happened
the
again.
cliffhanger again.
He's timing this. He is timing this.
This is what you call entertainment, right?
Tune in next week.
Bruh, you left us with the cliffhanger again.
We're going again. Yeah.
Now you're here. You're back now.
Yeah, so someone's trying to block these blessings, guys. I'm sorry.
It's been too much, man. Someone's trying to cut it off.
They don't want us to win.
Yeah. So back onto what I was saying, guys. It's the why. So I think as long as you continuously focus on yourself, focus on your progress and your development as a human being, man or woman, then you can influence those people, the people that are around you, the people that mean the most to you. Then you're doing your part, and that in general is my why.
My why, I feel like the work that we do, I feel like we've got so much potential within the community, and I don't see us working together as other communities do. So I feel like my why is to try and make my own impact to the point where we've got those synergies and sharing of information to elevate us to the next step. Because like you rightly said, Reuben, in the past, once you dig deep in the history, you realize like we've come from a lineage of a lot of people that have done great things. And I feel like because we're in such a privileged situation, we can do greater things.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
And it leads really well into 5 to 9 securing the bag. Now, I've got to say, when I saw what you guys were called and, you know, the emphasis, I made my own interpretation, because normally the system tells us to go and do a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to do your 9 to 5. And as quite clearly you said, Reuben, you're doing your 9 to 5. And both of you, after that, are working 5 to 9 on what you basically bring into fruition, essentially, to secure the bag. I mean, I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you know, there's a lot in that, and the fact that, you know, you guys are doing it. And one thing that we, as much as we're basically told to go into the machine and work until we die, it's all about creating the awareness of what the other layer of what our life could be.
Yeah.
Because, you know, as I say to, you know, to Shaimenda, is that at the end of the day, your life is destined for greatness. All our lives are basically, they're more than what we are. And it goes back to the whole thing of the Matrix. It's not until there's that bug or that plant that's sitting, or you're watered in a particular way to make you think, hold on a minute, there's a glitch in the system. I shouldn't be living this life. And that kind of, you know, patterns in nicely into, you know, again, correct me if I'm wrong, into the 5 to 9 secure the bag. So I'm all, on the back of that, I'm also interested to know, like, for people that are just doing their 9 to 5s and, you know, coming home, watching TV, things like that, how do they find, or what steps do they take? What simple steps, 3 simple steps can they basically take to secure the bag from a 5 to 9 perspective?
Yeah. So it's quite interesting, because we spoke about these things in the talk that Lugano and I gave earlier. As I mentioned before, we spoke at a church, and we gave a sort of financial workshop. And one of the things which we spoke about is having goals. You know, so you can have your 9 to 5 and it pays the bills. And I suppose it's about asking yourself that question of, is your 9 to 5 making you happy? Or are you going to work every single day hating life? You know, because if you are, then it's the likelihood that you haven't quite found your passion. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a few people out there that do 9 to 5s and they absolutely love it. And that's fine. And if that's your passion, that's what you want to do, that's fine. The business journey or path isn't for everyone. But if you ask yourself that question, whether you're happy in your 9 to 5, and your answer is no, then you should be dedicating some time each day towards finding your purpose and your path. And the second point is on having the goals. Have goals set, whether they be financial goals, whether they be employment goals, business goals, that sort of thing, personal goals, physical health when it comes to that. Because I just believe in reaching those, regardless of how small those milestones are, reaching those milestones is just so important for your mental health and just for your assurance of who you are as a person, just telling yourself that you can do things. And there's a certain belief, and as I said, just like your brain can be and your thoughts can be programmed negatively, it can also be programmed positively as well. So by you achieving certain milestones, you're reconfirming to yourself that yes, you can go out there and you can do those things. And most importantly, set aside some time for yourself. So if you have a young family like myself, or if you live by yourself and you're constantly surrounded by loads of friends or family and that sort of thing, have time to spend by yourself to figure out what it is that you want to do with yourself and where it is that you want to go with life. Because a lot of the times it's hard to shut out the noise. All of us are consistently on our phones, and we're so distracted. We've got that external distraction over and over again, so we never get the time to actually be with ourselves and just ask ourselves, are you okay? Are we heading the right way? Do we have to reset? So that's what I'd say to anyone.
Yeah, so Ruben's really touched on some good points there. The thing that the fourth one that I'll potentially add is, I remember I was reading an alarming stat that said the one thing that tends to affect quite a lot of relationships, once you dig deep, normally it's financially led. So with that being said, I feel like it's good for perhaps the listeners to also just realize that everyone's on a different financial journey, and this is not a race, it's a marathon. And once you have that honest conversation with yourself, it's just ways of taking small steps to try and improve those your financial journey. So it could just be small steps of just trying to find out what your credit score is and trying to improve that, trying to find out if there's any debts that you're, and ways of having to sort of putting a plan in place again to try and pay them off. Because eventually we don't live in an island. Eventually we're gonna have, we do have relationships with people. So you want to be going in these relationships knowing that you are owning your financial way, because if you are, then I think it makes it a lot more easier, and it also helps again with your mental health. I feel like we're in this age where there's a lot of information that's being thrown at us, and everyone seems to be living their best life. And sometimes it's easy to kind of lose yourself and always try to keep up with the Joneses, or try and keep up with whatever new that's out, the latest phone or whatever. But sometimes it's just good to just have that honest conversation and actually think, do I actually need some of this stuff that I've got? And I feel like COVID really showed us as well that the things that are important are the things that are within the four walls, which is us. So as long as we've got us, we can kind of survive with a bare minimum. We don't need quite a lot of these extras.
Amazing. I mean, you
Touched on a lot of things there, everything from knowing how to bring your true authentic self in a financial way, because I personally feel when it comes to relationships that it's a big fundamental that's missed out. And then after the honeymoon period, where you're kind of having to unpack, sort things out, and it makes the relationship very toxic. And like you quite clearly said, too many people spend their earnings on things they don't even need or want, and sometimes it's either to impress or just the fact that we're in the clicking world. You click it, you're going to get it out the door in 5 minutes, whether it's food or whether it's Amazon the next day. And being in lockdown has really given us time to just switch off,
stop, and gather everything
together to make sure that we're all heading in the right direction. And even if you're not, even if you're in a place of your credit is really bad, there's still ways to try and build and make it like you said. It's not, your name isn't Usain Bolt. It's not a 100-meter sprint. So yeah, thank you for that.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, I want us to transition more into the closing. I'd love to still unpack more of what you've said, but I'm also mindful of time, and I respect your time too much to do that to you. So we'll definitely be having another conversation. That goes without saying. So initially, I'd like to first ask you. So these will be more quick fire questions. First thing that comes to mind, just go with it, and we can go in whatever order. It's just pretend there's a buzzer. Whoever goes first gets it. All right. There won't be a prize at the end, but still play.
Offensive side is it's not as much now.
Hey, secure the bag. You guys have the budget, not me. All right.
Whoever goes first gets this emoji.
All right. So, firstly, we'll transition from secure the bag into our final questions with this one, which is, what's one piece of advice for people dealing with debt that you would give?
Be honest with yourself. Don't be afraid to sort of look at yourself in the mirror, and don't be afraid to face your problems head on, because that's the only way that you're ultimately going to solve them.
Excellent. Lugano.
As I said, the financial journey is a marathon. So whatever small steps you can start to take will have a good impact in the end. So don't view it as if there's nothing I can do about it. Even if you owe £10,000 and you're just paying £1 each week, it's still better than something than totally not doing anything about it.
Thank you for listening to Men Talk Ubuntu podcast and being a valued member of our community. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube, Instagram, and other social media now for access to our latest updates. DM us and let us know what your mental health is on a scale of 1 to 5. Take care. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And we'll then transition into our final closing questions, beginning with, what's the best thing about being Black? Reuben.
Best thing about being Black is do you know what? It's actually the way in which we interpret sound. Like for me, I find that brilliant in the way in which we move with sound. And you know when you walk into a place and you hear that song and you can feel it, like that to me is incredible. Like that, you feel it. That to me is just phenomenal. But on top of that, so let's say a little bit more on a serious note, I'd say is the opportunity in which we have based on our history. So a lot of the time, some people can see, oh yeah, life has always been this way for us, and we've experienced X, Y, and Z. But I see that as an opportunity for you to rise out of that and grow into an even bigger person, and just to influence. If every single Black person took the opportunity to realize if they realize the opportunity that they had in this world that we have right now, then the possibilities are endless for us, really, when you think about it.
Reuben knows me quite well. I love my food, so the flavors, the flavors, geez, the food is amazing. I mean, I've had some Angolan cuisine, and wow, that food is really nice. And it's just crazy how we tend to use similar food in terms of what we cook with, but it's how we cook with it, and the end product is totally different, and the taste is just crazy. That's a perfect segue to my next point as well. I feel like the culture as well. Similar to Reuben, I've been on a journey of just trying to unpack history and that kind of stuff, and realizing like how much of an impact that as a culture we've had on different industries has just been so amazing. I mean, again, this is stuff that you're not taught in school. So just unpacking that and learning, I think it further helps you reach your greatness.
Amazing.
Thank you very much for that, and I totally agree with what you said. So, without further ado, question number 2: who taught you how to shave?
Who taught me how to shave? To be honest, I've not even properly grown a beard yet, so I've still got a baby face. I think my barber probably taught me how to shave.
I was waiting for the answer, and I was like, what's this guy gonna say about his beard?
My barber show me how to shave, bro, because I don't really do it.
Just take it as being youthful, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for myself, I was self-taught, but I did take a trip back home, and but I spoke to my stepdad, and he was able to give me a few pointers. So yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And speaking of pointers, I
Mhm.
know often on your platform you speak about some of the resources that you all engage with. So I'd like to ask, what is a resource that you hope people still use, say, 100 years from now?
There's something about books. You can read, I don't know about you guys, but I can read something on my tablet and I could read the same information in a book. And what I read in a book is just, for me anyway, it just leaves a print in my mind where I digest the information a lot better from books. So I really do hope that books isn't something, with the rise of technology, I hope that books isn't something that dies out, because I really do think getting the words on paper is just a wonderful thing.
Agreed. Lugano.
For me, first thing that springs to mind is ancestry proverbs, because I feel like they really help guide us through life, and sometimes we always underestimate the value of them. Similar to like what I was talking about with my dad giving me those pointers of how great I feel like the ancestry proverbs have got a similar way of guiding us in life. It's
Mhm.
almost like our intuition of what to do. I hope that doesn't fade out in 100 years, because the way technology is going, it looks like machines will be doing the thinking for us.
Well, rest assured, if they do the thinking, we'll make sure that they're programmed with all the African proverbs.
Yes.
And
I got
also,
you.
that.
just on that topic there as well, which is why it's so important for us, as Black men, women, to be able to express ourselves in different ways and be confident enough to go after the things that we want to do, whether it be IT, no matter how nerdy they seem. Because if we look at it from this point of view, right, so as we're heading into the future, as technology evolves more, as AI evolves more, now you've got to think about the initial sort of programs that these AI and these machines are going to have. And then when you've got to, and when you think about that, you've got to think about who's programming them. So predominantly right now, we've got the Asians and whites programming these AI machineries. Now, a lot of the times, if these AI machinery then go into the public sector where they are conducting who does what and what is right and wrong, that is going to come from the minds of an Asian or a white person. So that means a lot of the times we are not going to be able to see our expressions within these AIs if we're not in these industries. So very vital. So if you are into IT, get into it.
Wow, no, that's such a vital point, because I remember attending a workshop about technology and stuff, and they were really crying out for Black coders to get into that space, because they were giving examples of just simple technology as, do you know, when you go into the restrooms these days where there's an automatic soap dispenser and obviously the automatic thing, dryer to dry your hands, because we're not in those spaces, typically these machines are trained on the whites and the Asians. So even just the recognition of a Black hand is sometimes difficult. So if you push that narrative with what Reuben was talking about, it can really become really serious and start to affect us in a really serious way.
And I think there was a young Black medicine student who basically develops different ways for a machine to acknowledge when how disease and illnesses show up on Black skin, because apparently in the medical school they was only taught how to identify that on white or lighter skins. So little things like that makes a massive difference in regards to where we're headed.
Totally agree.
This is why it's so important for us to do what we're doing, because essentially we're also putting ourselves and also other Black men on this platform, essentially, and other successful people, to also show and represent to the younger generations. And it goes back to what we're speaking about previously, because at the end of the day, if we don't know what we don't know, how can we pass that on? And the fact that we know that, we can pass that on to our younger generations. they could pass that on to the younger generations, and that kind of technology you're both talking about could basically be there, you know, in the near future. And that transitioned perfectly into what I was going to ask. Since, you know, Reuben's frozen, I'll still ask nonetheless. What do you wish more men spoke about?
Is it Reuben first or myself?
No, you.
Go ahead.
Oh, right. Okay. To answer your question, Ray, I think it's almost links to what you guys are doing, which I must commend you. This is really good work. And I mean, it's really had me digging deep in my thoughts as to when I started the first experience in mental analysis of myself and that kind of stuff. I feel like the vulnerability for me is what men needs to start to speak about, because I feel like sometimes we have this bravado faces like nothing affects us, when in actual fact there's a lot that affects us, and the image of a man out there is really to be the provider and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of layers and stuff that you have. So sometimes it's quite relieving to be able to speak about it, not saying that you're crying about it or anything like that, but there's something genius in being able to speak about it. And once it's out there, I feel like it's easier to kind of move on to the next step, rather than holding it all in to a point where it's breaking point and then it's a bit too late then.
So sorry, you're going to have to repeat the question for me.
What do you wish more men spoke about?
Oh, what do I wish more men spoke about? For Black men, I'd say I wish we spoke more about progress rather than survival, in the sense that, you know, we can talk about girls and minuscule things that don't really have a great effect in our lives in the long term. So I wish we transitioned from boys to men, and I wish we normalized that sort of transition and the conversations as well, because we all know a 36-year-old that still wants to be in the clubs talking to 19-year-old girls. But I wish that there was more clubs like these, like what you guys are doing, more spaces for us to be able to go and have our conversations, and to just be able to have conversations in regards to how we can all move forward and improve as one.
Amazing. What a fabulous way for us to transition to the final close. If you're listening, I'm sure you would agree that these gentlemen are proactive, positive, and absolutely progressive. And we need much more of that, especially in our own community. This isn't a space to be bitter and wallow in your sorrow. It's a space to get better and have a bias towards action. I really do also love the podcast episode you mentioned with Shaf, because one of his examples of coming up with a product for a restaurant, all the way up to the design phase, up to the very end, and then being given an honest piece of feedback that meant he completely ditched that, but it gave the world munchies. Not the kind of munchies you're thinking about, the restaurant munchies. and it is that can-do attitude that the song I Can by Nas kept ringing in my head, especially when you spoke about our heritage and the heritage we can find out, where he says, you know, we were kings and queens, never porch monkeys, you know. That is the image we should get. That is the energy that we should go for ourselves and for our history with. Thank you. I want to commend you, you know, for giving people the confidence when it comes to their financial education and literacy, for giving them the ability to work through their pain and progress towards something better for themselves and for those who they love. And I want to commend you both for setting such a beautiful example of what a Black man can be, and for allowing us to share with the world an image that they don't often see. Remember, dear listener, to subscribe to Secure the Bag 5 to 9 on Instagram and YouTube to develop your confidence and financial literacy. Rather than let you say where people can find you, I've done that. I want you to let the people know some of the cool stuff you're working on now and why they should connect with you?
Yep. So at the moment, we've been doing some fantastic projects. So we've worked with 3 organizations within our region. So one being Action Collective, where they get people from the community to give out talks. So whether it be mental health, we could actually connect you guys with them actually, whether it be different businesses, just talks, and it's a niche group where people can just share their ideas. We've also done a presentation for Women's United affiliation, where it's women that are recently coming to the country in the UK, and where we was able to give out a workshop for them to begin their financial journey, so that they then don't fall into the traps that you can fall into financially. And just today we spoke to a church, to the youth at a church, in regards to what they can do to improve their credit score. So we're quite open to, and we actively seek to go into different parts of the community and speak to different parts of the community, just to see how we can provide our help, and how we can a lot of the time just liaise with them, just so we know where to go, because it's about sharing information at the end of the day. So if you know a plumber and he's your friend, and if you need something doing in your house, make sure you use that person. If you know someone that owns a bookstore, a book business, and you want to buy a book, make sure you go to that person, because in that way, that's the way that we can all grow together.
Yep, and just in addition to that as well, we also do the Sheffield success stories, and I think we'll probably be opening up to the UK success stories, because we definitely need to have you guys on our pod so we can shoot an episode of that. So we tend to have episodes once every 2 weeks. So with there, it's just showcasing of the brilliance within our community. And as Reuben says, if they are professionals that you might need their services, you never know, they might be on Secure the Bag episodes. So tune in, and hopefully we can be able to help you with whatever you need.
Amazing.
I really want to thank you guys for your time, for what you're doing in the community, and how you're changing minds in terms of securing the bag, not just 9 to 5, but 5 to 9. Same with you guys. And I'm looking forward to what securing the bag 5 to 9 also brings for us in the near future as well. Make sure you stay tuned, and thank you again, guys.
And thank you for having us on as well. Great work that you guys do. I've really enjoyed this talk as well. I definitely think it's needed throughout the UK. And I'll definitely be keeping updated to how you guys develop as well.
Yeah, no, just addition, guys. Yeah, thank you very much for having us on your pod. It's been really a good talk. I mean, it's good to see 4 Black men being honest and having this conversation. I mean, mental health is something that really affects everyone on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes just having the conversation is really important. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out again on Secure the Bag, our handle is at Secure the Bag 529 on Instagram, and we've also got a YouTube channel. So yes, keep posted, and yeah, we really look forward to work with you guys in the future.
Brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure, gentlemen. And dear listener, just remember to subscribe, comment, connect, and keep learning, keep listening, and take very good care of yourself, because it is good and it is important that you are here. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of the day and your week. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed creating.
Don't forget to follow, like, share, and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our latest episode and listen to any you missed. And tune in next episode.
Take care.